So that not only is this a physics experiment, it's also a geology experiment. In other words, how can you figure out what rock will be stable enough to make a cavern this size? There have been caverns this size made, but never this deep. So the engineering of it is a research project in itself. So what does this mean in terms of underground science in the rest of the world? Just go over the right side of this diagram. These, the vertical lines represent depth, and the size of these cubes represent volume. So you can see this is the Kamiokanda laboratory in Japan, where those mirrors were, where those guys were polishing the mirrors. And this is the Gran Sasso laboratory in Italy, which is currently the largest underground laboratory in the world. It's actually built in a highway tunnel under the Apennines, east of Rome. And this is the Snow Lab in Canada, where Ray Davis's experimental results were verified. That's about 6,800 feet. And the green here, various shades of green, would be the Homestake Dussel. So you can see that our 4850 level itself would be bigger than Gran Sasso, but this laboratory would more than double the volume of underground laboratory space in the world. So it's huge. Slight problem. The National Science Foundation has taken a long time to figure out whether they actually want to build this. Meanwhile, in 2003, Homestake shut off the water pumps. And there was a big row, and I wrote some stories about this in the Rapid City Journal. One physicist actually called the governor's home, but Al Mann from the University of Pennsylvania. Now he must be in his 90s. Back then I think he was in his late 80s, a big neutrino guy. And he said he was at the Ramada in Rapid City, and he was getting ready to go up to Homestake to chain himself to the gate. The governor had to talk him down. Spent about an hour on the phone with him, saying, Al, this might not be the way to go. But anyway, the pumps were shut off, and so the mine has been slowly filling with water since 2003. This is that 6 winds that goes all the way down to the 8,000 foot level, and I took this photo last spring. And so if you, from the 4550 level, so you know that's about 3,500 feet of water straight down. So the water kept rising, and the problem was if water filled this mine, all of a sudden the usefulness of having all this infrastructure would pretty much disappear. So South Dakota had a solution, and here's the South Dakota solution. Number one is the money. The legislature appropriated about $34 million, actually it's a little bit less than that. We got a HUD grant for $10 million way back when to rehabilitate the Homestake. We used it to reopen the Ross Shaft. And then the big dog in this fight, is T. Denny Sanford, decided to donate $70 million to this project. So we had a total state commitment of $121 million. Then Homestake Mining Company in 2006 finally agreed to donate the Homestake mine to the state of South Dakota. We didn't get the open cut or the tailings impoundment, which we didn't really want, but they donated 186 surface acres and 7,700 underground acres. So in 2006, there was kind of a little bit of a ribbon cutting ceremony. There's T. Denny right there and the governor. And we created the Sanford Underground Laboratory at Homestake. The plan was to say, and the plan is, the governor and the South Dakota Science Technology Authority said to the National Science Foundation, you have had half a dozen blue ribbon panels look at this. The whole physics community, not just in this country, but worldwide, says this is a priority. We believe that this is going to be built somewhere. We will reopen this, and we will get it ready for you. And because the National Science Foundation moves so slowly on big projects, we're going to sort of make an interim Sanford Underground Laboratory. There will be experiments in it, and not only will it be ready to go, or at least ready to build when you get here, and empty of water, but it'll also have running experiments in it. Of course, the National Science Foundation had not yet picked Homestake. So all this money was kind of held in abeyance. They didn't immediately start spending it. The National Science Foundation still had to pick Homestake, and it started out with there were 8 or 10 different sites around the country that wanted it, And then finally there were 4 sites that were kind of what I call the final 4 of physics, and they spent months and months studying these sites. And on July 10th, 2007, the NSF said, if we build an underground science and engineering laboratory, a national underground laboratory, if it happens, it will happen here at Homestake, nowhere else. So that's all the state needed to start up. So here's the property that we got. This is we also got the wastewater treatment plant, which turned out to be important. And here's the H shaft, and here's the raw shaft, and here's lead over here. Now this is how, remember those diagrams of the mega detectors and the big experimental halls here? That's how that sits. So it's right under our property. The green is our property. And we began pumping, and this is the old Homestake pumping configuration. There's 2 700 horsepower pumps at each of these levels, and we're getting ready to open up this pump station here. The water's now just about here. We've got 12 submersibles every 300 feet from about here up to here, and there's a couple large submersible pumps in 6 winds. This is where the water is right now. So it's about 5,022 feet underground is the top level of water. And I've been doing, at the governor's insistence almost a year ago, I've been doing a weekly water report. Said people ought to know, where are we? So every Monday I sent out a press release, and for the past few weeks and for the next coming few weeks, it's a really boring press release because it's the same. We're just kind of holding the water here, between here and the 5,200. Those big submersible pumps that we have in now only go to about the 1,500 foot level. So we don't want to uncover those. But we have to keep the water pumping through the water treatment plant in order to keep the bugs alive. We use rotating biological contactors to remove some ammonia. So you can't just, it's not a plant, and some of you know this way better than I do. You can't just turn it on and turn it off. So we need to keep a steady stream of water, so we're just keeping just enough water running through the pumps to keep this water level until about January, when we'll have a new giant submersible pump that will sink all the way almost to the 8,000 foot level, and then 2 new 700 horsepower pumps that will pump up. So that's what we're doing now. That's one of those submersible pumps. This is one of the big 700 horsepower pumps that Homestake used. They had to be refurbished, but they still work. This is one of the 2, I call them torpedo pumps, but they're submersible pumps that are down in 6 winds. And these are actually scientists eagerly awaiting to get to the 4850 level. That's a former hoist room underground at the 4550 level that's now a pump station. You can see the pipes. So this is what the water looks like. You remember I showed you that picture that had the shaft and it looked murky, and it was, well, that's the dust that settles on top of it. It doesn't really look, I hesitate to use that picture. It makes scientists up there nervous when I do, because it looks like we're full of oil or something. But this is what the water looks like when it comes out. And I took this picture a year ago last spring. Dr. Larry Stetler from the School of Mines was testing water quality, and this was like the first jet of water that came out, and I saw that and I thought, gosh, we could bottle this and sell it as Homestake water. But that was an idea. It would be as good as Willard water. But there was a problem. In about 5 minutes, exposure to oxygen, that's what the water looks like, because it had iron in it. And this was a big shock. Homestake never had this. Well, for a couple reasons. Number one, Homestake was continually pumping it, and it's really a fairly dry mine. It's only about 700 gallons a minute. So that sounds like a lot, but that's not even the biggest irrigation pump there is. So Homestake pumped all the water out right away. Most of it was trapped as runoff near the top. Some of it was pumped out from the bottom, but it didn't stick around. Well, this water has been in the mine since 2003, so it's had time to leach iron. So it's not really what you call a toxic substance, but on the other hand, you can't be turning the creek red either.